Imagine inheriting everything you've ever wanted: the house, the business, the wealth, but there's one condition: you have to give up your life to get it. That was the choice my father left me in his will. What I didn't know was that everyone around me had their own plans, and in the end, I chose peace over everything. And trust me, no one saw it coming. But here's the twist. What happened after I walked away shocked everyone, including me. My name is Lily, and growing up, my father controlled almost everything about my life. He was the kind of person who made sure you knew what you owed him, whether you wanted to or not. I tried to make my own way in the world, but deep down, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of his expectations. I never really knew my father's true feelings about me. He was always cold, distant, and wrapped up in his work. The moments when he did pay attention to me, it felt like I was being judged or used to meet some standard I couldn't even understand. My brother Zach, on the other hand, could do no wrong in his eyes. Zach was always the golden child, the one who was going to take over the family business. I wasn't like that. I was different. I had my own dreams. I wanted peace. I wanted to be free from the constant pressure to perform, and I wanted a life of my own. But in our family, that wasn't possible. I had to meet my father's expectations, and I had to live by his rules. That was the price of his approval. But everything changed when my father passed away. He left behind a will that turned my world upside down. The day we gathered to hear it, I had no idea what to expect. I thought it would be just another formality: sign the papers, thank him for the house, and move on with my life. But what I found out shocked me. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. In his will, my father gave me everything: his estate, the business, his wealth. But there was one condition, a condition that felt impossible to accept. The letter said, "You can have everything I've built, but you must give up your life for it. You'll live for the family business, and you'll remain loyal to me forever. If you accept this, it's all yours." At first, I couldn't even process what I was hearing. I was stunned. My father, who had never cared to truly know me, had decided that everything I ever wanted could be mine, but only if I agreed to lose myself. No more independence, no more freedom. I had to live for him, for his legacy. That was the price of everything he had built. My mother, sitting next to me, was already emotional. I could see how badly she wanted to hold on to whatever legacy my father had left behind. But she was passive, always going along with what he wanted. Zach, my brother, didn't seem bothered by it. In fact, I could feel his eyes on me. There was something cold in his gaze. He didn't care about the inheritance in the way I thought he might. Instead, he seemed to want something else, something that he wasn't saying. As I sat there, holding the letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a will. It was a trap designed to pull me back into the same controlling grip my father had held over me all my life. But I was ready to break free, or so I thought. I didn't know it then, but the decision I was about to make would send everything spiraling out of control. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. When I heard the terms of my father's will, I was frozen. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about the choices I could make, seemed to shatter in that moment. To most people, inheriting everything would be a dream come true. The house, the business, the money. What more could you want? But for me, it felt like a weight, a trap I couldn't escape. My father had made it clear, if I wanted his legacy, I had to give up my life. I couldn't be the person I was anymore. The freedom I'd worked so hard to carve out for myself would be gone. I stared at the letter in disbelief, my hand trembling as I clutched the paper. My father had always been a man of few words. He had spent my whole life measuring me, controlling me without ever showing any real affection. His love was a prize, something you earned by following his rules. And now, even in death, he was doing the same thing. I could have everything, but I had to become him. I had to take over the family business, carry on his name, and abandon everything else. My dreams, my friends, my life outside of his empire, gone. It didn't matter that I had never wanted this for myself. It didn't matter that I had my own goals, my own plans. I felt trapped. My mind raced with thoughts, but I couldn't think clearly. How could anyone expect me to make such a decision? I had been away from the family business for years. I built my life on my own terms, and now I was being asked to give that up for something I didn't even want. I had tried to escape the suffocating grip of my father's world, but this felt like a permanent return. My body tensed, and I looked around the room at my family. My mother, sitting quietly beside me, seemed to be processing everything in a different way. She wasn't reacting to the will like I was. She looked at me with hopeful eyes, as if she wanted me to take the inheritance, to take control, and fix everything my father had left behind. She had always been the passive one in our family, going along with whatever my father wanted, and now it seemed she was expecting me to follow the same path. Then there was Zach, my brother. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel his eyes on me. There was something in his gaze that unsettled me. It was like he was sizing me up, waiting for me to make a decision. He didn't seem shocked, didn't seem to care about the inheritance, in the way I thought he would. If anything, he looked indifferent. But there was something else in the way he was looking at me, something that felt off. As I sat there, holding the letter, the pressure to make a decision grew heavier. I knew my father's will wasn't just about money. It was about control. He had always controlled me, always used his wealth as a means of holding me hostage. Now, in death, he was still trying to do the same thing. I couldn't shake the feeling that accepting the inheritance would mean giving up who I was, but rejecting it felt like throwing away everything my father had built, everything he'd worked so hard for. It felt like a betrayal, and I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing my mother, even though I knew this wasn't the life I wanted. But then Zach spoke up. "You don't have to do this, Lily," he said, his voice low but firm. His words didn't make sense to me at first, but I looked up at him, and I saw something in his eyes, a hint of sympathy, maybe even care. But then he added, "If you don't want this, if it's too much for you, then walk away. You don't have to take everything on your shoulders." There was something strange in his tone, something that didn't quite sit right with me. He was supposed to be the one who wanted the inheritance. He was the one who had always wanted to prove himself to my father, who had always competed with me for my father's approval. And yet, here he was, telling me to walk away from everything he'd been fighting for. Was it really because he cared about me? Or was there something else at play? Mia, my best friend, was sitting beside me, her hand resting on mine. She looked at me with the kind of reassuring smile she always wore when she was trying to calm me down. "It's okay, Lily," she said softly. "You don't need this burden. You've already made a name for yourself. You don't need the stress, the responsibility. You should just live your life, free from all of this." Her words sounded comforting, but they felt hollow. Mia had always been there for me, or at least I thought she had. But something about this moment felt off. She was agreeing with Zach too easily, encouraging me to walk away without any real consideration for what it would mean for my future. Was this really the advice I needed? Or was she just trying to push me in a direction that served someone else's interests? I was caught between two worlds. The world my father had created for me, full of expectations and pressure, and the life I had tried to build for myself, one that was free from all of that. But every time I thought about walking away, I felt a deep, gnawing fear. If I rejected the inheritance, what would I have left? Would I be able to rebuild my life? Or would I be left with nothing but regret? Zach's indifference, Mia's comforting words, and my mother's silent expectations made the choice even harder. It was as if everyone around me was pulling me in different directions, none of them truly seeing or understanding what I needed. And in that moment, I realized something. No matter what choice I made, I was alone in this. No one could decide this for me. The only thing I could control was my own decision. But I was terrified. The days following the reading of my father's will were the longest of my life. I couldn't shake the weight of the decision I was facing. On the surface, it seemed like an easy choice. Accept everything my father had left me. Take control of the business. Live the life I had always been expected to lead. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. My father's conditions felt suffocating. They were a promise of control, not freedom, a life where I would never have the opportunity to be my own person. His legacy wasn't a gift. It was a chain, a reminder that my life would forever belong to him, even in death. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that accepting the inheritance would mean sacrificing everything I had worked for. The life I had carved out for myself, the one where I made my own decisions and stood on my own 2 feet, would be gone. I would become my father's puppet, fulfilling his ambitions instead of living my own. But rejecting the inheritance seemed impossible too. After all, this was my father's legacy. He had worked his entire life to build this empire, and if I turned it down, what would I be leaving behind? The thought of disappointing him, of disappointing my mother, was almost too much to bear. I spent days locked in my room, pacing back and forth, trying to make sense of it all. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I wanted to break free from the suffocating expectations. But on the other hand, I felt like I was abandoning something important, something that had been in my family for generations. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, reminding me of the weight of his legacy, the responsibility that came with it. I kept thinking about how proud he would have been if I had accepted, if I had taken control of everything he had worked for. But pride wasn't enough. It couldn't be. That was when Zach's words started to take root in my mind. You don't have to do this, Lily. If it's too much, walk away. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Why would my brother, the one who always fought for my father's approval, be encouraging me to leave it all behind? But as time went on, I began to realize that Zach wasn't telling me this out of some sense of care for my well-being. No, he had his own agenda. Zach had always been the golden child, the one my father trusted with the family business. But that trust had always come at a price. I could see now that Zach wasn't motivated by a sense of duty or responsibility. He was motivated by his own desire for power. He had spent his entire life trying to prove he was worthy of my father's approval. And now, with my father gone, he saw an opportunity to finally take what he felt was rightfully his. He didn't care about the inheritance for the sake of continuing the family legacy. He wanted control. And if I accepted the will, that would mean he lost his chance. Mia, who had always been my closest confidant, seemed to echo Zach's words. You don't need this burden, Lily, she had said, the night we talked after the will was read. You've already made a name for yourself. You don't need to live for him anymore. At the time, I had believed her. I thought she was looking out for me, helping me see the truth. But now, looking back, I couldn't help but wonder if she was part of Zach's plan all along. Their alliance, their calm encouragement for me to walk away from the inheritance, it was too convenient. It was as if they were both working toward the same goal, to make sure the inheritance stayed within their reach. The truth hit me slowly, like a wave crashing against the shore. Zach and Mia weren't concerned about my well-being. They didn't care if I was happy or free. They wanted the inheritance for themselves, and they were willing to manipulate me into giving it up. They had played their parts perfectly, convincing me that walking away was the best choice, that I didn't need the wealth, that it was too much for me. They had made me doubt myself, doubt my own instincts, and I had been naive enough to listen. The moment of clarity came one evening when I sat down and reread my father's letter. It was as if the weight of it lifted for a moment, and I saw the truth in bold letters. My father had been controlling me all along. His will wasn't a gift. It was a final attempt to trap me in his web of manipulation. He had left me everything, but at the cost of my soul. If I accepted, I would never be free. And if I rejected it, I would be free. But at what cost? In that moment, I made my decision. I would walk away from it all. I wouldn't let my father's legacy define me. I wouldn't let my brother and my so-called best friend manipulate me into making a decision that wasn't truly mine. I didn't care about the wealth. I didn't care about the power. I cared about living my own life without the chains of family expectations holding me down. I walked into the lawyer's office the next day and signed the papers. I rejected the inheritance, but what I didn't know then was that my decision would unravel everything. My mother would never understand. Zach would never forgive me. And Mia? She would reveal herself to be someone I never truly knew. The moment I walked away from the inheritance, I thought I was making the right decision for myself. I truly believed that rejecting the wealth, power, and control my father left behind would set me free. It felt like a victory, even though I knew the road ahead would be difficult. I had chosen peace over everything else, and I thought that would be enough, but I didn't. Realize how much my decision would shake up everything around me, and how the people I trusted would reveal their true colors in ways I never saw coming. I handed the signed papers to the lawyer, rejecting my father's inheritance, and walked out of the office with a sense of finality. I thought I had taken control of my life, but little did I know, I had just handed over the reins to someone else. Zach had always been the one vying for my father's approval, the one who thought he was next in line to inherit the family empire. He never cared about what it meant for me, only for himself. So, when I rejected the inheritance, it was like I had handed him the keys to everything my father had built. I felt a strange sense of relief, but it wasn't long before I started noticing the change in my family's dynamic. The first person to confront me was Zach. He stormed into my apartment a few days later, his face twisted with anger. His eyes weren't the ones of a brother who cared about my well-being, but of someone who felt betrayed. "What the hell, Lily?" he shouted, his voice rising with frustration. "You gave up everything. You gave up the future we were supposed to share. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. I never imagined Zach, my own brother, would turn on me like this. He had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. I thought he would understand my decision, but instead, he was furious. "I never asked for this," I yelled back, the anger and hurt spilling out. I didn't want to live in his shadow, Zach. I didn't want to live a life where I'm constantly judged and controlled. But as I spoke, I realized something. Zach wasn't just angry because I walked away from the inheritance. He was angry because he had been counting on it. He had been waiting for me to give up, for me to fail, so he could take everything for himself. And in that moment, it hit me. Zach wasn't my ally. He never had been. He had been playing his own game all along, and I had been too blind to see it. A few days later, the truth about Mia came crashing down on me. She had been my best friend, my confidant, someone I trusted more than anyone else. But as I pieced together the puzzle, I realized how foolish I had been. Mia had always supported my decision to reject the inheritance, telling me it was the right choice. She had been there for me, comforting me, telling me I was making the right decision. But as I thought about it more, I began to see the cracks in her words. She had been too eager to push me toward walking away. Why? The answer came when I found a series of messages on Zach's phone. Messages between him and Mia. They were having an affair. They had been using me, manipulating me to ensure that I would walk away from the inheritance so they could take it all for themselves. It wasn't just about family loyalty or helping me find peace. It was about their own greed, their own desire for control. I was in shock. Mia, the person who had always claimed to have my best interests at heart, had been conspiring with Zach to steal everything from me. She wasn't my friend. She was a part of the same toxic web of manipulation that my father had built. The realization hit me harder than anything else. I had been betrayed by the two people I trusted most. My brother, my blood, and my best friend, both had used me for their own gain. And the worst part? They thought they had won. They thought I was out of the picture, that I had given up everything and walked away. But they didn't count on one thing: my mother. Elaine, my mother, had always been passive, always following whatever my father and Zach told her. But she wasn't blind. She had seen the signs. She had seen how Zach and Mia had been manipulating me, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, when I was sitting in the living room, my mother came to me with a look in her eyes that I had never seen before, one of quiet strength. "Lily," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I know what they've been doing. I know about the affair. And I know they've been using you to get what they wanted. You were always my baby, and I've always let things happen without stepping in. But I'm not going to sit back anymore." In that moment, everything changed. My mother, the woman who had always been so passive, so willing to let others control the narrative, had finally found her voice. She told Zach and Mia that she knew about the affair and that the truth would come out. The family's reputation, which had once seemed so important, would now be destroyed by their lies. And just like that, their carefully constructed web of manipulation started to unravel. As for me, I knew I had made the right choice. The inheritance didn't matter anymore. It never had. What mattered was that I had finally chosen myself. I had chosen peace. And in doing so, I had exposed the truth. Zach and Mia could have everything they wanted, except for one thing, their integrity. That they had lost forever. In the aftermath of rejecting my father's inheritance, I found myself standing at a crossroads I had never expected to reach. I thought that walking away would be the hardest part, that rejecting the wealth and power would be the final decision, and from there, I would be free to rebuild my life. But the reality was far more complicated. When everything unraveled, I discovered something I hadn't anticipated. The decision to walk away didn't just change my life, it shook everyone else to the core. The first few weeks after I rejected the inheritance were quiet, too quiet. My mother, once a constant presence in my life, had retreated into herself. She seemed torn, almost like she couldn't decide if she was disappointed in me or relieved. On the one hand, she had always been a woman of the household, and my father's legacy was all she had ever known. But she also understood what I had done. I had chosen to walk away from the very thing that had once seemed like a dream, and she had to come to terms with that. I expected some kind of reconciliation, but it never came. Instead, the silence between us grew. She didn't fully approve of my decision, but she wasn't vocal about it either. I could see the disappointment in her eyes when she looked at me, but there was no anger, no confrontation. It was a quiet sadness that seemed to linger in the air like a thick fog. Zach, on the other hand, couldn't hide his fury. As soon as he realized that his plan had been thwarted and that Mia's affair had been exposed, he became a shadow of the person I had once called my brother. He didn't just want the inheritance. He wanted to take everything from me. The betrayal, the manipulation, the lies. They all crashed down on him at once. And rather than accept the reality of what he had done, he lashed out in ways that shocked me. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" Zach shouted at me one evening after the affair had come to light. His eyes were wild with rage, and for the first time, I could see the true extent of his selfishness. "You think you're so righteous for walking away, but you just ruined everything for both of us. I was going to take it all, the business, the money. It was supposed to be mine, but you had to screw it up." His words were harsh, and they stung more than I cared to admit. I had always tried to be there for Zach, even when he didn't deserve it. But this was different. This wasn't the brother I knew. This wasn't the person I had spent my life protecting. This was someone who was willing to destroy everything just to get what he wanted. Mia, too, wasn't innocent in all of this. At first, I couldn't bring myself to confront her directly. She had always been the one person I could trust, the one who had comforted me during some of my darkest times. But after learning about her affair with Zach, everything changed. The person I thought I knew, the person I thought was my best friend, was gone. She had been playing a role all along, pretending to be my ally, while secretly conspiring to help Zach take everything that had been my father's. The worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She didn't apologize or try to make amends. Instead, she left me to pick up the pieces, left me to bear the weight of my decision while she quietly faded out of my life. The truth about their affair, and their manipulation, was out in the open, and neither of them had any excuse. I had been used, but they didn't care. They had what they wanted: the inheritance, the power, the business. They had won, or so they thought. But as for me, I had gained something much more valuable: peace. I had walked away from the very thing that could have kept me trapped forever. I had walked away from the expectations, the pressure, and the control my father had placed on me. And in doing so, I had found freedom. Freedom that I hadn't realized I had been craving for so long. The wealth, the power, and the prestige no longer mattered to me. What mattered was living my life on my own terms, making choices that aligned with my values, not my father's, not Zach's, and not Mia's. There were moments when I questioned whether I had made the right choice. It wasn't easy to walk away from everything my father had worked for, everything that had once seemed like a dream. There were days when I felt lost, unsure of what to do next. But over time, I began to rebuild my life. Slowly but surely, I started to find joy in the little things, the freedom to make decisions without being judged, the ability to follow my own path without feeling like I was disappointing someone else. As for Zach and Mia, their world came crashing down. The affair they had tried to keep secret was now exposed for everyone to see. The family business, which they had been so eager to control, slipped further away from them. They may have gotten the wealth and the power they had always craved, but they lost something far more valuable: their integrity. The family's reputation was in ruins, and no amount of money could fix that. They had played the game of manipulation, but in the end, it was their own lies that destroyed them. Looking back, I realized that walking away from the inheritance was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, and it didn't come without consequences, but it allowed me to find a peace I never thought possible. I didn't need the money, the business, or the approval of anyone else. What I needed was to live my own life, free from the chains of expectation and manipulation. And that was worth far more than anything my father could have ever left me. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts.